God, how I wish I knew these things before I became an au pair. Hey au pairs, it's Edwina, and I just want to start this video by saying, as much as Hannah and I work hard to show you the pros and cons about being an au pair, we have blind spots, which is why we've created the APOP community. We always open up and lean on you guys. So before I even go into the video, I wanted to ask you to write in the comments down below if you are an au pair already, what is one thing that you wish that you knew? Or if you're becoming an au pair, what's one thing that you're nervous about? And we'll try to respond to those as much as possible. But yeah, I just want to see like what's on your mind when you even think about this topic. Okay, so now that's out of the way, I wanted to break down and talk about 5 things that I wish that I knew and Hannah wishes that she knows before we even became au pairs 6 years ago. Number 1 is that babysitting and nannying and being an au pair are not the same thing. Dang it, I wish I realized just the amount of differences there were between these things before I had taken the job to be an au pair. And I figured it out and it was fine, but before I went into being an au pair, I figured that like babysitting and stuff and experience babysitting was going to be enough to take me into 12 months of watching someone else's kid, and boy was I in for a shock. I would say that au pairing is more like nannying. You're on a nanny schedule and you're not paid by the hour, so that can kind of be confusing, but if you're looking to become an au pair, definitely be a mother's helper, father's helper, or a nanny for a little bit to get a really good understanding of what the dynamic's gonna be like. Because the things that you have to worry about when you're an au pair / nanny that you don't have to worry about with babysitting is disciplining, getting the kids to really respect you as an adult that is there every single day. And that sounds ridiculous because coming from a babysitting perspective, kids should be able to respect you and listen to you off the bat if they're just respectful kids. That is true, there's a part to that that's true, but if your kids are accepting you as like an older sister or as a part of the family, older sisters get bullied and parents are not always listened to, and so you have to have a system in place in order to make your life easier and to make your kids' lives easier, because kids like rules, and understanding that dynamic and how to even navigate that situation is gonna make your life so much easier. So I just wish someone had told me to do that before I went into au pairing, because the only childcare experience I really had was babysitting and then watching my cousins. And in babysitting, you come in, you watch the kids for a little while, they go to sleep sometimes if you're doing it at night, and then you leave and you're paid by the hour, a pretty good amount for what you've done. So it's not that way. And in au pairing, it's hard to remember that you get paid in other ways and you're paid in accommodation and food and all that stuff. So it can be kind of draining for the amount of work and energy that you're putting forth. So definitely keep that in mind, and that's definitely something that I wish that I knew. The second thing that I wish someone had told me before I became an au pair was that horror stories happen all of the time. Seriously, all of the time. I wish that I knew that, to be honest. And like, even though I went through a horror story, it felt so much like I was alone during that time. But it happens to the best of us, and we try to be as transparent as possible on this channel, which is why we have my horror story video up and all that stuff. But it can feel quite daunting when you feel like you made a choice to be with a family, you interviewed with them tons of times on Skype, and then when you arrive, you just don't vibe. That's normal. And tell us down below in the comments if you're going through a horror story experience. I think my best advice for that is to give it time and give it honesty and communication. If you write down and really give it a moment to think about what are the things that are bothering you, that's going to help you if you do decide to rematch and decide to choose another family. But that's also going to help you weigh out whether you can stay with this family or you really do have to leave. Because every au pair situation is different, and I wish that I hadn't thought it was gonna be so ideal, because I started comparing my situation to other au pairs, and then that made me feel like my situation was much worse than it actually was, and then it kind of got into this whole mess because I wasn't being communicative with my family about the problems that I was having. I wasn't being honest, and I kind of just up and left them in a bad spot. And it was hard for me because I was homeless for a little while and it felt really scary. I wish that I had the APOP community back then, because I would have known from just going onto our Facebook group that people sometimes just don't vibe well with their family right off the bat, and it takes a couple of weeks / months to really find your rhythm and find a good relationship with your family. So don't leave right away, ride it out, because it really does take time, but also know that you're not alone and it happens all of the time. Number 2 is a perfect segue into number 3, which is that you might quit. Oh, the amount of times that I wanted to quit my au pair year, and Hannah as well. I remember, honestly speaking, like just being honest, taking out calendars all the time, and I would spend my free time counting down the days because I really wanted to prove to myself that I could make it through the 12 months that I had planned out, and I even went beyond 12 months, but I really just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, and I did it. But not everybody gets through their au pair year, and that is completely okay. Sometimes you realize childcare is a lot harder than you expected. It's really not a thing that you want to do. Living abroad is really hard. Starting from 0 is really hard. There's so many freaking challenges, and I wish that I had made it a little bit more okay for myself to quit, because luckily, you know, I found my best friend, I founded all this community, all these beautiful things happened, you know the story. But it can feel really, really upsetting to have to go back to your home country and say that you gave up. But you know what? You didn't give up. You gave it a shot. You took the plunge. You know what it's like to live in another person's culture, country, language. Like, that is so cool that you even jumped and did that and did something that was off the beaten path. And even if you don't follow it through to the end, the fact that you took a risk is going to help prompt you and push you to take risks later on in life. So don't be discouraged if you decided that au pairing wasn't for you. It's hard. Childcare is hard. It is not for everyone, but it's also not the only way to travel and live abroad. You can work in hostels. You can work on working holiday visas and do other things. You can take abroad internships and au pair somewhere else. Maybe you didn't find the perfect family for you, but it is not the end. Just because you didn't survive au pairing doesn't mean that it's the only way to live abroad and it's a big failure on your part. I just wish that I told myself that message before when I was really going through hard times, because I really did go through really rough and depressing times when I was an au pair, and I just was really hard on myself, I think. And I think that's something that a lot of au pairs go through. 4th thing I wish I knew, au pair salary is very meager. I kind of knew this going in. Luckily, I was working at a restaurant like almost full time before I left, so I had a lot of savings, but I used them all up because I wanted to travel when I was an au pair. I wanted to do a lot of different things. But I really got good at budgeting, and honestly, I feel like my au pair year really primed me for being a good saver now, which has really helped me out in the rest of my life, and it's really helped me prioritize saving for travel and saving for, you know, different things that I want to do, and then not spending money on stuff that I just don't really need. Like, all these clothes are hand-me-downs, and that's a really big way that I save, that I learned from my au pair year. Au pairing, like, on average, minimum, you get paid 320 euros a month in France, and you work 25 hours a week. Some countries you work way more than that and you're paid a little bit more. Some countries you're paid a little less. Put down below how much you make, just to inform the other au pairs in our community. But yeah, it is really meager living, and you really, really, really have to get good at budgeting, writing every single penny down. Hannah was like the master at this. She was actually able to save, she never traveled, she was able to save like more than $1,000 for her course that she did after au pairing by saving on her meager salary every month, which is like insane. And she was also paid separately for groceries because she really lived independently from her host family, whereas I was paid just my au pair salary, and I didn't get paid anything on top of that because I was living and eating their food in their apartment. But yeah, everyone is paid differently because everyone has different living situations, but it's all pretty meager, and so that means sacrificing a lot of different things. Like, I didn't go to a gym all that year, I didn't eat at restaurants all that year, and I went on a lot of dates, to be honest, that I didn't offer to pay for because I literally could not. The last thing that I wish I knew about au pairing, the 5th thing, is that in Paris, au pairing is very different than it is in other places in France and in other places in the world. Paris is super unique in that the buildings, the old traditional buildings, are built Haussmannian style, which means that the top floors of all the buildings have something called chambre de bonnes, which is a French word, which basically was a maid's quarter back in the day. And so the maids would live in like not even one studio apartments. It's like your bed, your sink, your stove, and your shower are in one apartment, and then your bathroom is in the hallway, like in a dorm style that you share with everyone else that lives on top. And the people that are living on top with you are students, other like young, single, poor people like me, and other au pairs. And so it's kind of a fun little community. Sometimes you have retired people up there living as well, because it's just like small, and some of the studios are renovated so they're more like livable. But it's really cool because as a young person, you don't really need that much space. You're around, I mean, you're outside all of the time. So it's really nice to have that independence from your host family, and I loved that. But outside of Paris, in the suburbs, in different cities, you're gonna be living with your host family. Sometimes if you're lucky, they have like a separate shed or separate entrance for you where you can live and be independent completely. But most of the time, being an au pair means living with your host family, and that's a completely different dynamic. I've done that before, and I've also lived with host families before when I studied abroad multiple times, and I loved it and I hated it. It's just something that is completely different and something that you have to get used to. So don't think that being an au pair completely means you're gonna have your own studio in another country. Like, oftentimes it means that you have to live with the family, but sometimes you do get your own car, which is super cool and another way to have your own independence. I remember in the south of France when I was living with my family, I had my own car, and I got to drive to Nice, I got to drive to Cannes. One of my friends had her au pair car, and we took it on a road trip through Italy, so it was super, super, super cool. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing to be living with your host family, but it's just something that I wish I knew and that I didn't want to expect. Like in Paris, au pairing is a completely different animal than it is in other countries and in other parts of France. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, give it a like, because it really supports our channel. We love hearing what your perspective is and what you wish to see on the channel in the future. So comment down below with suggestions. We really do look at them and try to answer as many comments as we can. As always, you can go on aupaireaupairist.com to find more free resources and to become an APOP member. We can't wait to see you there and at some of our events in France and in Europe. All right, that is all for now. Ciao!